You sign the lease renewal. Same apartment, same neighborhood, same rent, plus 3%. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a voice whispers, "You're throwing money away." Not your voice, someone else's. Maybe your parents. Maybe your uncle at Thanksgiving. Maybe the real estate agent on the billboard you pass every morning. They all say the same thing. Rent is wasted money. A mortgage builds equity. You're paying someone else's mortgage instead of your own. And you feel it, that low hum of shame, like you're failing at something you didn't sign up for, like you're stuck in financial adolescence while everyone else grew up and bought houses. So you start browsing Zillow late at night. You run the mortgage calculators. You imagine yourself with a yard, a garage, a front door that's yours. You think, maybe it's time. Before we go any further, this is Donkey. If you want calm, honest explanations about money, you're in the right place. Here's what's strange. The pressure to buy a house doesn't feel like advice. It feels like gravity. It feels like the only responsible thing to do once you hit a certain age, a certain income, a certain life stage. And the script is everywhere. Your coworker just bought a condo. Your friend from college posted a photo holding keys. Your cousin made a down payment, and everyone congratulated them like they'd won something. Meanwhile, you're still renting. And the longer you rent, the more it feels like you're missing the boat, like wealth is happening to other people while you sit on the dock, watching. But here's the thing nobody talks about. What if the boat isn't going where you think it's going? What if the script you've been handed, the one that says buying is always smarter, always better, always the path to wealth? What if that script is based on math that no longer works? Not because you're doing it wrong, but because the world changed and the script didn't. Let's start with the phrase, everyone uses throwing money away. When you pay rent, the money leaves your account. It doesn't come back, that's clear. But when you buy a house and make a mortgage payment, you're told that payment is different. You're told it's building equity. You're told you're paying yourself. And that sounds right. It feels right, until you look at where the money actually goes. In the first few years of a 30-year mortgage, 70 to 80% of your monthly payment goes straight to the bank as interest, not to your equity, not to your net worth, to the bank. You might pay $3,000 a month, and only $400 of that actually reduces what you owe. The rest disappears, just like rent. Then there's property tax. You pay it every year, forever, or the government takes your house. It's not optional. It's not temporary. It's a rent you pay to stay on land you supposedly own. Then there's maintenance. 1 to 2% of the home's value, every single year. Not renovations. Not upgrades. Just keeping the thing functional. Water heaters, roof repairs, pest control, HVAC replacements. Then there's insurance, homeowners insurance, flood insurance if you're near water, earthquake insurance if you're on a fault line. And then, if you ever decide to sell, there are transaction costs. Real estate agent fees, closing costs, staging, inspections. All told, about 10% of the home's value just to get out. Add it all up. Interest, taxes, maintenance, insurance, fees. And suddenly, the amount of money you're throwing away as a homeowner starts to look a lot like rent, sometimes more than rent. You're still throwing money away. You're just throwing it at a different landlord, one made up of the bank, the state, and the hardware store. So if both renting and owning involve money that never comes back, if both have unrecoverable costs, then how do you know which one is actually better? There's a number, a ratio. It's not talked about much outside finance circles, but it's the most important number in this entire decision. It's called the price-to-rent ratio. You take the price of a home, divide it by what it costs to rent a similar home for a year. If a house costs $500,000 and rents for $2,000 a month, $24,000 a year, the ratio is about 20. Historically, a ratio below 15 means buying makes sense. A ratio above 20 means renting probably makes more sense. And in most major cities today, Toronto, San Francisco, New York, Austin, Sydney, the ratio is 25. 30, sometimes higher, which means the math is screaming at you to rent. Not because renting is perfect, but because the cost of financing that massive purchase price is so high that it far exceeds what you'd pay to just live there. By renting, you're essentially living in $1 million asset for a fraction of what it would cost to own it. You're letting the landlord take on the risk, the maintenance, the market volatility. You're consuming the housing service at a discount. And yet, you still feel like you're losing, because the script told you ownership equals wealth and renting equals waste. But here's where it gets worse. To buy that $500,000 house, you probably need to put down $100,000, 20%. That's $100,000 of your cash locked inside a wall. It's not liquid. It doesn't pay dividends. It doesn't compound. It just sits there, frozen. If you had taken that $100,000 and invested it in the stock market, something boring like an S&P 500 index fund, it would historically return about 10% a year. That means it doubles roughly every 7 years. By locking it in a house, you're making a bet. A huge bet. You're betting that your specific local real estate market will outperform the entire global stock market. And historically, it doesn't. Robert Shiller, Nobel Prize winning economist, proved that over the last century, real home prices have barely kept up with inflation. The big gains people talk about, usually inflation illusions, or lucky timing in bubble markets during specific decades. Real estate doesn't make you rich. Leverage and timing sometimes do. But the house itself? It's just a place to live. So if you rent and invest that $100,000 down payment and invest the monthly difference between rent and ownership costs into the stock market, you're choosing liquidity, diversity, and a higher expected return. You're not trapped. You're not betting everything on one asset, in one neighborhood, in one city. You're building a liquid empire while the landlord worries about the roof. But there's something else. Something nobody puts on a spreadsheet. When you buy a house, you lose the ability to move easily. Your house becomes an anchor. If you get a job offer in another city that pays $50,000 more, the renter packs up and leaves in 30 days. The homeowner, stuck. They have to list the house, pay 6% to agents, pay closing costs, stage it, wait for buyers, hope the market isn't down. The transaction costs alone can wipe out years of equity in a single afternoon. By buying, you're shorting your own mobility. You're betting that your current location will be the right place for you for the next 7 to 10 years. If you're wrong, the exit fee is brutal. Renting buys you optionality. And in a world that changes fast, optionality has value. But still, the objection? The one everyone raises. Rent goes up. My mortgage is fixed. And that's true. A fixed-rate mortgage is a hedge against inflation. Your payment stays the same while everything else rises. But your property taxes don't stay fixed. They go up. Your insurance doesn't stay fixed. It goes up. The cost of replacing your roof doesn't stay fixed. It goes up. You're not immune to inflation, you're just exposed to it differently. And while rent does go up, so does the stock market. If your portfolio grows at 7 to 10% a year, it will likely outpace the 3% annual rent increase. You're using appreciating assets to pay for your lifestyle, not using your lifestyle as your only asset. There's also something quieter, something harder to measure. Owning a house is a part-time job. It's weekends at Home Depot instead of with your kids. It's stress every time you hear a strange noise. It's knowing that if something breaks, you're the one who pays. When you rent, you outsource that stress. You call a number. It gets fixed. You're buying time. And if you use that time to learn a skill, start a side hustle, or just rest, you might find that renting actually increases your income potential because you're not distracted by a deteriorating asset. You're free. But freedom feels irresponsible when the entire culture is telling you that ownership equals adulthood. So here's the uncomfortable question. What if the people telling you to buy aren't doing it for your benefit? What if the script exists because it benefits someone else? Let's go back to that voice in your head, the one that says you're throwing money away. Where did it come from? Your parents, probably, and they got it from their parents. And it made sense when they said it, because the math was different. When your parents bought a house in the 80s or 90s, the price-to-rent ratio was reasonable. Interest rates were higher, but home prices were lower relative to incomes. A down payment was achievable. A mortgage payment wasn't that much more than rent. And more importantly, home prices doubled or tripled over 20 years in many markets. They bought in, they rode the wave, they built wealth, and they assumed that's how it works, forever. But they didn't build wealth because buying is magic. They built wealth because they bought at the right time, in the right market, with the right conditions. The script worked for them. But the world they're describing doesn't exist anymore. Home prices in major cities have exploded relative to incomes. The price-to-rent ratio has gone from 15 to 30. Down payments that used to take 3 years to save now take 10. The math changed. But the script didn't. And here's the thing. The script doesn't just come from your parents. It comes from an entire industry that profits when you buy. Real estate agents make a commission when you buy. Mortgage brokers make money when you borrow. Home builders need buyers. Banks need borrowers. Local governments need property tax revenue. Everyone in the system benefits when you believe that renting is failure and buying is success. So the message gets repeated, over and over, until it feels like truth. And if you don't buy, you're told you're financially immature, irresponsible, wasting your prime earning years. But let's be clear about what buying actually is. It's a leveraged consumption purchase. You borrow 5 times your down payment to buy a single asset in a single location that requires constant maintenance and cannot be sold quickly. If you did that with any other asset, if you borrowed $500,000 to buy a single stock in a single company, people would call you insane. But because it's a house, it's called building wealth. The truth is simpler and quieter. A house is a place to live. That's it. It can be a good place to live. It can give you stability, control, and pride. But it is not a guaranteed path to wealth, and it is not morally superior to renting. The path to wealth is owning income-producing assets, stocks, bonds, businesses, things that pay you. A house is an asset that you pay. It doesn't send you a dividend check. It doesn't compound while you sleep. It just sits there, demanding money and hoping the market goes up. So when does buying actually make sense? It makes sense when the price-to-rent ratio is low. Below 15, ideally, it makes sense. When you're planning to stay in one place for at least 10 years, it makes sense when you value customization and control more than liquidity and flexibility. It makes sense when you've already built a solid financial foundation, emergency fund, retirement savings, diversified investments. And it makes sense when you're honest about what you're buying. You're not buying an investment. You're buying a lifestyle. And that's okay. People buy lifestyles all the time. They buy nice cars, nice clothes, nice vacations. But they don't pretend a nice car is a wealth-building strategy. A house is the same. It's a consumption choice wrapped in the language of investment. And the danger is when people treat it as their only investment, when the down payment wipes out their savings, when the mortgage stretches their budget, when the house becomes their entire net worth. That's not wealth. That's concentration risk. That's putting everything you have into one illiquid asset that's one natural disaster, one neighborhood decline, one market crash away from financial ruin. The disciplined renter who invests the difference, who puts the down payment into index funds, who saves the gap between rent and ownership costs, who stays liquid and diversified, often ends up wealthier. Not because renting is better, but because they didn't confuse shelter with wealth. They kept their money working. They stayed flexible. They built a portfolio instead of a single asset. And when the market crashed, or the job disappeared, or life changed direction, they had options. The homeowner? Trapped. So here's what this comes down to. You're not failing if you're still renting at 30, or 35, or 40. You're not financially illiterate. You're not refusing to grow up. You're just refusing to follow a script that no longer matches the math. And that takes courage. Because everywhere you look, the culture is telling you the opposite, telling you that ownership equals success, that renting equals waste. But the culture isn't running your numbers. The culture isn't living your life. The culture isn't the one who has to make the payments when the market turns or the furnace dies. You are, so run the numbers. Check the price-to-rent ratio in your city. Look at the unrecoverable costs. Calculate what you'd earn if you invested the down payment instead. And if the math says rent, then rent, with pride, with clarity, with no shame. Invest the difference. Build your liquid wealth. Keep your options open. Let the landlord worry about the roof, and let the script die. Because the goal was never to own a house. The goal was always to own your life. And sometimes renting is how you do that. This is Donkey. Thanks for staying.